All right, so I'm going to go live with Nathan Ingram, who is putting out a kind of an online magazine called Daily Art of Survival, but he's a guy who's been doing martial arts for a very long time. And so I'm going to be bringing him in here, and so we can talk about, kind of his history and his magazine as well. All right, Nate, so I accept you to... Nathan, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I'm great. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Now, for people that are watching this, if there's anybody who's not familiar with you, maybe you could introduce yourself a little.
Okay, my name is Nathan Ingram. I'm a martial arts instructor. Been teaching now. I've been in martial arts for 54 years. I've been teaching for 49 years since 1973. I'm the CEO of the Deadly Art of Survival magazine, which is not only online magazine. It's a regular magazine, paperback, that you can get on Amazon. Actually, we're the #1 martial arts magazine on Amazon at this point. So, studied various different styles from Shotokan karate to Goju karate, Kung Fu, 7-star praying mantis. I studied white crane, and I was a bare knuckle fighter from in the early 70s until the late 70s, early 80s, very early 80s. And I was a full contact kickboxer also. And that's pretty much it.
Now, I know you've been teaching for a long time. You were basically like the first African-American to have a school in Chinatown, and that area you were in New York or Manhattan. What inspired you to do that, to get into martial arts?
Well, a friend of mine by the name of David Fernandez was studying Shotokan back in 1968. We were in school together, and he was known to be a really good fighter. And we were good friends. We were in the same class. I believe we were in the 6th grade together. And he came to my house one day. It was a Saturday. I'll never forget, Saturday morning. And we, would watch cartoons together on Saturday morning, cartoons. And he came to the door and he knocked on the door. My mother opened up and he had his gi on, and my mother thought it was his pajamas. And she came to the back room and she says, your crazy friend David is here. And this time he has on his pajamas. And when I went outside, I realized it wasn't his pajamas. He had a karate uniform. And at the time, I didn't know exactly what it was. I knew it was karate, but I didn't know what you would call the gi. So I didn't know how to explain it to my mother. I just told her that's what they wear when they practice karate. So he took me into the hallway. She let him in the room. He took me into the hallway, and he began kicking me around the hallway, showing me what he knew. He was about a yellow belt. So I was familiar with karate because at the time, the Green Hornet TV show was a little popular. And Bruce Lee, he wasn't very popular like he is now at all, but people knew they liked him as a kind of like a superhero type guy. He wasn't like legendary the way he is now, known, for his skills. So he took me to his karate school that Monday at the Educational Alliance right outside of Chinatown. And I didn't want to go in. I didn't want the instructor to think I was only a white belt. So what we did the night before, we went to the drugstore, and I think about it, I'm laughing because it's so funny every time I tell the story. And we bought a bag of 15-cent dye. And a friend of mine, God bless the dead, Frank Banks, he did judo. So he had a white belt, and he loaned me his white belt, and we put the belt inside my mother's tub, and we poured the water in it. Now, during that time, when they made product was very strong. It's not like it is now, watered down. And it turned my mother's bathtub green. So we took it up to the roof. I lived on the 15th floor, and we took it up to the roof, and we tried to let it dry out overnight. But if anybody knows that kind of dye and you wet it, it doesn't dry, and it's going to get on your clothes. And when I got to the karate school, that next day I had green all over my hand. I had the karate the karate uniform that my judo uniform that my friend Frank Banks let me use, the dye got all over the gi. So when we walked into the dojo, my instructor at the time name was Angel Crespo Sensei. And he was very strict Shotokan stylist. And when I walked in and he seen the green all over my uniform, he knew right away I didn't know what I was doing. So he started naming me some stances in Japanese. Niko Ashidashi, Zenko Shinachi Dabrai. You know, he was saying this. And I'm looking at him like baffled. I didn't know what he was saying. And he stops and he goes, I thought so. He said, get out. He made me get out of the dojo. And I went in the locker room and I was feeling really bad. So I had to wait for David and Frank to end the class. And I sat in the locker room and I changed my clothes and the instructor came in. And I think he felt a little bad. I guess he figured if this little guy wanted to train this bad, that he went to this length to train, I'm going to train him. And that's how my beginning started in martial arts. That's how I began. How old am I now? Oh, how old was I then?
When that happened, yeah.
I was 11 going on 12.
Okay.
So it was in 1968 going into 1969, around that area. Yeah.
So if you were an adult, he probably would have gone even harder on you, probably.
Yeah, he probably would have. And the fact that, to tell you how young I was, I couldn't even go home by myself, so I had to wait until my mother entrusted David and Frank Banks to bring me to the karate school, so we had to walk back together. So I had to wait for them, and you know how I was very humiliated sitting in the locker room, and I'm like, I could hear them doing the kia and training hard and thumping. And back then, there was no such thing as an hour class. You know, the class lasts 2-3 hours straight. You know, you got to remember, in those days, all we did was train very hard. There was no cable TV, no cell phones, no computers, none of that stuff. So we didn't have 1,000 channels. Back then we had maybe 11 channels and that was it. And so that's all we did was train. You know, you didn't see out of shape instructors. Everybody was in shape. So the classes lasted, you know, really long. And, you know, during that time I would train for oh my God, I can't even tell you countless hours that I would train, you know, and teach. Mm-hmm.
Now, as you're kind of coming up in karate, who were some of your like influences or maybe people that you looked up to?
Back then there was a gentleman by the name of Joe Hayes. He was a Taekwondo stylist. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He studied under Richard Chun. And he was an incredible martial artist. I really gravitated to the martial artists that really personified martial arts, that was really in shape and really trained hard and had the big knuckles. And a lot of my training, I patterned after them. And so Joe Hayes was definitely number one. Grandmaster Ron Van Cleef, which I won a couple of his bare knuckle championships back in the early 70s at the Orpheum Theater. I beat a couple of his fighters, Victor Elwin Sanchez, for Ernest Hyman, all those guys, Fredo Rodan. So Chaka Zulu, Ron Takanashi, Wilfredo Rodan, who I wound up fighting. Those were some of my, the guy, Moses Powell. I found out a little bit later. I didn't know much about Moses Powell because you got to remember, I grew up 1 block away from Chinatown. So I was basically in Chinatown my whole life. I was the only black member of an all-Chinese gang called the Ghost Shadows. So a lot of people don't know that. So I didn't grow up in Harlem or Brooklyn like a lot of the people did. I grew up in Chinatown. So I only knew of instructors that I heard of. You know, even though these guys were very popular, unless you had the money to buy Black Belt magazine or Official Karate magazine was big back then. Yeah. They had a lot of the East Coast people, but Black Belt magazine never had the East Coast people. So unless I bought Official Karate and I had the money to buy it, because I was a kid back then, I didn't work. All I did was I would go outside and do demonstrations and make money in the park by breaking bricks and fighting and sparring with my students and doing ippon with my students. That's how I made my living for years. Because I taught for free. So I would basically improvise. I would wash dishes in the village and do little odd and end jobs until I became a bodyguard and I developed a real job. Mm-hmm.
Now, you talked about, the Karate Magazine and Black Belt. Maybe for people who, people that are newer fans of like mixed martial arts and things today aren't familiar with just how influential those magazines were. Maybe talk a little
Yeah,
bit about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, of course, we all know the most popular magazine at the time was Black Belt magazine, but you had quite a few also that followed suit through with Black Belt magazine, which was Karate Illustrated, Official Karate, Inside Kung Fu. Um, I don't think Taekwondo Times was around during that time because a lot of people don't realize Taekwondo is not as old as what they think that a lot of people think it is. Taekwondo might be 70 years old, so or a little 70, 80 years old around there. But anyway, Black Belt magazine was the number one magazine at that time. And it was maybe 50 cents. I don't know how much it was, but 50 cents was a lot of money back in those days. Matter of fact, my son and I was talking about that. The things that you can get with $1 was incredible. A dollar nowadays would have been like almost $20. I mean, back then would have been almost $20 nowadays. And and you living in the hood, I lived in the project, Alfred E. Smith projects. So, I didn't have a lot of money. So buying the magazine wasn't a priority. Training was a priority. But when I did get a job, I was able to read up on a lot of people. But I basically knew the Nisei Goju Karate Federation, Ron Van Cleef, who later on developed Chinese Goju. I knew them because they were basically in the same demographics as I was in that same area in the East Village. Chaka Zulu was on 5th Street. Frank Ruiz, Nisei Goju was on 7th Street. Ron Van Cleef was around 7th Street, that area. You had Ron Takanashi in the West Village. You had Malachi Lee, which was on 14th Street. So all these, Manjin Lee also was near Chinatown. He was one of the first karate schools. A lot of people say, oh, Nathan and Peter Urban was one of the first to have karate school. No, Peter Urban was the first. Then Manjin Lee, who was on the corner of Market and East Broadway in Chinatown, he was next. And then William Louis, I don't know if you heard of him. They used to call him the second coming of Bruce Lee, William Louis. He had a school in Chinatown. And then I came in and I started teaching. So these guys were a little before me. Like I've been in 54 years. These guys were like going on 60 years in the martial arts or more or better. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ron, I know he moved to Oahu. He's been training a lot of jiu-jitsu people that I lived on Oahu for about 14 years. So a lot of the people he's training with now are people that I know, and
oh, wow.
Yeah, he's kind of become, to where he's training jiu-jitsu fairly regularly.
Yeah, I speak to him all the time. He reaches out to me and we talk. Ron Van Cleef was he was my idol back then. A prolific martial artist, man. Very excellent fighter, good performer. When he called me up, I'll never forget, in April of 1976, when he called me up to fight at the Orpheum Theater for him, because a lot of guys didn't want to fight in the bare knuckle during that time, but you had guys that would. And he knew I was one of them, and he called me up, and I couldn't believe I was on the phone with him, because during that time was when he was making the Black Dragon movies. And I was like, Ron Van Cleef. And he said, yes, Nathan Ingram, I'd like you to fight on my card. How do you feel about that? And I was like, tell me where I sign. And we became friends. We knew each other before that because actually, I don't know if a lot of people know that's listening to this. Back in the early 70s, Ron Van Cleef, Frank Ruiz, Chaka Zulu, Joe Hayes, guys like that, they used to go around closing down illegitimate schools. Mm. You couldn't fake martial arts back then when we was coming up. These guys can fake it, and they got 1 million instructors, all these stripes on their belts. You couldn't fake it back then because the Nisei Goju Karate Federation, they would go around and shut you down. That's where he got his fierce reputation from, because he came to my instructor school it was after I fought in one of his tournaments. He didn't know who my instructor was. And I was on the floor training one day, and I heard my instructor speaking a little loud, which was uncharacteristic of him. And when I came to the front, there was standing all the guys that I mentioned, and they were talking to my instructor, and Ron Van Cleef and Rodin, Fredo Rodin, God bless the dead, who was a good friend of mine, they realized it was my instructor. And they said, "Oh, this is you're Nathan Ingram's instructor. Why didn't you say so?" And they hugged me and we shook hands. And they knew me because prior to that, I had fought in Ron Van Cleef's championship and won it. So that back in the days, you would get closed down. There was a lot of schools that George Cofield used to do it. I don't know if you heard of George Cofield. He's big in the New York area. All these guys I'm naming are from the East Coast, but these guys are I'm telling about monsters in the martial arts. Now, I train, and still I'm 65 years old, and I still train. These guys were training before me, and they came up old school, so they weren't putting up with the fake schools and all of that like they have now. Most of these schools would have been closed down now. These guys are so weak. Not all of them. You got some good schools. And I don't want anybody to get offended, and don't put on Facebook that Nathan's talking too much. But a lot of these guys, you need to lead by example and start training more. You know, that's just my opinion. Go ahead.
What was the connection between Ron and the guy from The Last Dragon who cornered him in UFC 4?
You're talking about Timok.
Yeah.
Timok was actually Ron Van Cleef's student. Timok started training with Ron Van Cleef in 1980, and how I know this personally, I met Timok in 1981. I was known for being a bouncer in clubs as well as a bodyguard, and I met Timok at a club, a really big club called Barnes International Disco. It was one of the biggest clubs in all of New York. I was the head of security in 1981. Timok used to search people when they came in, and, you know, he'd make his little $50 a night. Back now, that would be $250 a night. He would make his little $50 a night. And there would be times where he didn't have any money. He didn't get paid. And he would borrow 50 cents from me to get on the train. And we became friends. And he was a purple belt then. And then we would be sparring partners. He would come to my dojo in Chinatown, and me and him would spar. And then I got a call one day from him, and he was telling me, "Listen, I'm not going to be around for a while. Can you cover my spot at the club? Because I'm going to make this, I just got a deal to make this movie, The Last Dragon." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Good for you." No, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. He said, "I auditioned to do this movie." That's what he said. And he said, "So I don't know what's going to happen." And he wound up getting the part, and the rest is history. So I was speaking with Timok a couple of weeks ago. We're really good friends. He used to come and watch my kids after training. Like, I would get ready to go to work, and he would say, "Listen, I'll take your kids home. I'll bring them to your mother." And he would bring them to my house. I trusted him. Good guy, Timok.
That movie, like, what was I'm trying to think. A lot of people saw it, obviously. I think it was, what do you think it's historically that movie's place is, The Last Dragon?
Oh, you got to put it right. You know, I wouldn't say like Into the Dragon, but you got to put it up there in terms of history, historical movies, classic movies. Last Dragon, I remember actually when the movie first debuted, I bodyguarded Timok. And when he was touring around the city, when the movie was on 42nd Street, and he was at that time just as big as Bruce Lee. Actually, in the urban area, he was equal to Bruce Lee in terms of reputation. He was a good-looking guy, still is, you know, and a very good martial artist. And a lot of people don't know Timok is an undefeated kickboxer. A lot of people don't know his background. I know, I sparred with him. He was extremely good martial artist. And in my opinion, I think that a lot of people don't know that side of him. They don't realize he was really good in martial arts.
So you put the movie, I mean, I think it's interesting to have someone you talk about it, because you kind of put it high up there as far as an influential movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, anybody that disputes that is because they're jealous or they just want to have something negative to say. A lot of the people that talk about it wasn't even born in that era. Every era has a movie that we can identify from that era if we lived. But people see it now, like my movie, The Deadly Art of Survival. Right now, if you see it, it's one of the worst movies that was ever made, as far as I'm concerned. It was a horrible movie, horrible. We didn't have a script. We improvised. The producer didn't know what he was doing. So it was like it was a trial and error. Everything we did, we had to say, should we do this? Should we do that? So it came out horrible. But it was a classic. Nowadays, if you see it, it's absolute garbage. I don't even tell people, don't even watch it. It's horrible garbage. But back then, it wasn't too bad, even though the acting was horrible. But most martial arts movies, the action was horrible unless you came from China or Hong Kong, where they were very familiar with how to do it. We in America, we weren't familiar with how to do it. You know, real karate looks bad in the movies because you don't have retakes you don't have retakes in real karate. But in the movies, you'll look better because you have retakes. You could do it over and over and over again. But we didn't have the liberty of doing that when they did my movie. We did it one shot, and that was it. You know, and the director didn't know how to take angles and things like that. However, after my movie, The Deadly Art of Survival, which was debuted in people said 1979, it debuted in 78. I remember the director, Charles Ahern, wind up becoming a top director after that and did the movie Wild Style. And he did Wild Style in another movie. And Wild Style to this day is a classic. You know, so we didn't have Motown, let me just say this. Motown did The Last Dragon. So I think they had just finished doing The Wiz, if I'm not mistaken, the movie The Wiz. It was the black rendition of The Wizard of Oz. And then they did The Last Dragon. So they were familiar with what to do, how to make good movies. Because Diana Ross was in it, Michael Jackson, all these people were in it. So those movies now, you see them and you don't rate them high because those are old, they look terrible, the acting was bad. But back then, it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. Mm-hmm.
Plus, I think that was one of the early films that kind of, connected maybe hip-hop to martial arts a little bit.
With The Last Dragon?
Yeah, one of them.
No, actually, Wild Style did. The movie Wild Style is what connected hip-hop with kind of like with martial arts. I think I would have to say Wild Style was above The Last Dragon with that. Last Dragon was more like a disco type movie.
Disco.
More like a disco. But Wild Style was the one that really brought out the hip hop culture. And Beat Street. There was another movie, Beat Street. I think Beat Street was after Wild Style. I'm not sure how it went. But Beat Street was another one. And those two movies was what put rap music and hip hop on the map.
When it comes to martial arts, though, but that's what I meant. Like, I know.
Oh, when it comes to martial, I'm sorry.
You have these theaters in New York where I know that some of these kung fu movies and some of the, like Wu-Tang Clan talks about and all this stuff. How much were you around that?
Oh, I bodyguarded a lot of those guys. I was around the whole time. These guys are younger than me. A lot of these hip hop guys. There's very few of them that's my age that's still around. During that time, I was very involved. I wasn't involved in terms. I was never into rap music, and still I'm not into rap music. But I never seen the connection between rap music and martial arts. I personally never seen it. But I knew a lot of instructors that did, and they made that connection. I personally didn't. I was into bodyguarding them for the money. No other reason.
But did you go to some of these movie theaters where some of these martial arts films are being shown in
No.
In New York or
now or back then? Not really. I was never I might have seen in my entire life maybe 4 martial arts movies
Oh wow.
in my entire life. I used to work in a movie theater as an usher. Matter of fact, the day Bruce Lee died, 1973, it was the summer of 1973. I believe it was the late summer. I remember when everybody came running in the theater, it was a Saturday, either Saturday or Sunday, and they were saying that Bruce Lee had just died. I'll never forget, like it was yesterday. And the movie Enter the Dragon was debuting in, or was it? Yes, it was Enter the Dragon debuting in that movie theater when he died. And I remember it was called the Liberty Theater. And I remember saying, wow, I really got to find out more about this guy, because I really wasn't a big Bruce Lee fan. Not that I didn't like him, don't get it wrong. I wasn't really impressed with martial arts on film. I grew up in the hood, so I was more, you want to impress me? Let me see you get into a street fight and use it. That's the kind of guy I was. My whole life, I was known for that. So a lot of the martial arts movies that people talk about, I really never seen them. I wasn't a martial arts movie buff. Even to this day, my grandchildren ask me about certain movies, because I have 20 grandkids, and they'll ask me about martial arts movies. And I tell them, I said, Grandpa, I never seen that. And they're shocked, but I never really seen too many martial arts movies.
Now, when the UFC first came out, did you watch it initially?
No. How I found out about UFC, it was a funny experience. I was working at a club in the West Village. The club was called, it was named after a lady. Okay, it eludes me right now. And it was on 9th Street and 5th Avenue. And I remember I was working the front door and my back was turned. And a lady was coming up the steps and she let out a horrific scream. Apparently, a guy put his hand up the lady's dress. But the guy who did it didn't realize the lady's boyfriend was behind him. And so when he did it and he got to the top of the steps, the boyfriend said, "What did he just do?" And the lady told the boyfriend, and I kid you not, this man hit this guy with an elbow so quick, swept him and stomped him all in one move. I had never seen this in action from somebody else, that I didn't know. I seen this from guys I knew that would bounce with me, and many guys, Panama, Doc Cliff Williams, these guys were big martial arts guys, and we used to use the bad guys in the club. We used to use them as crash dummies, and we beat the living crap out of them, and we used to get away with it. There was no laws back then. Don't beat up the bad guy in the club. But this was the first time I seen a guy I didn't know do it. But he did it so clean. So when they were walking him away, I said to the friend, I said, "Who is he?" And he goes, "Oh, man, he's a UFC fighter." And he said, he didn't say UFC. He said cage fighter. That's what he said. And that's the first time I heard that term, cage fighter. And then after that, every time I would hear this, that's how I got familiar with the UFC. But to be honest with you and to be transparent, we were doing in the 60s and the 70s what these guys are doing in the UFC now. They're just more popular because we didn't have equipment. Full contact equipment didn't come out until 1977, 1978. I had already almost 10 years in the martial arts, and so did many other guys along with me. I'm not the only one. All we did, what in the tournaments like they do now, they play the patty cake. It wasn't no patty cake. When you got into a tournament, there was a tournament called Fred Hamilton. He used to give Fred Hamilton's championship. I forget the correct name, but Fred Hamilton was the promoter. You tape up your knuckles. You taped up your wrists. You went out there, and unless you got punched in the mouth and bled, you were not getting a point. They weren't paying no patty cake, and we were ripping gis off guys, sweeping them off the floor, and all of that was legal in these tournaments. The stuff I see now with these guys with the pillows on their hands and feet and the helmets and the gladiator gear to protect them from a punch, I'm not used to this. I'm not used to that. I was a bodyguard for 30 years, a bouncer for about 32 years. And I came from the rough, hardcore streets. So that patty cake stuff, I'm not disrespecting it at all. I think everything has its place. That's sports karate. It's good. I think it's a good thing. But when you want to talk about hardcore, man, it's a big difference in my generation than this generation. Huge, huge. You can't even compare.
But as it's happening, I mean, a lot of the early guys are getting exposed to it. When was the first time you maybe saw it?
The UFC, the actual, I can't even tell you. I didn't watch TV much for years. So I might have actually finally seen UFC in the mid 2000s, maybe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I was always working nights, so I didn't get to see the fights. I would hear about it, but I wasn't familiar with it. Not until, yeah, I would say about the mid 2000s is when I became more familiar with it. But I knew I had seen it, like I said, told you in the club. I seen it and I thought it was extremely effective, and I thought it would work in the street. I said, these guys would kill somebody in the street, but I had never went to see a fight and stuff. And then I got a call um, from a representative of the USC for me to fight. This might have been about 2000 and had to be about 2007, 2006, and I started training. And I went to Kentucky with my daughter, got out the car, went to step down, and pulled my back. All my training went out the window. And, I'm getting older. I got 17 broken bones, and it's no secret. I still train, but, I'm physically, I'm not like I used to be when I was younger. And I admit it. But don't you young boys try me.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the bouncing, because I know that the bodyguarding, because I know you bodyguard for, some well-known people,
Yeah.
Maybe talk about a few of them.
I'm sorry if I'm going all over the place, everybody. I'm just having fun. I don't talk like this. I'm going all over the place. He's asking me a question. I'm going somewhere else. Some of the people that I bodyguard: Tupac, Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, Trey Songz. Oh man, I can go on and on. LL Cool J. Multiple high profile executives and things like that. I can go on and on. I can't remember everybody's. And if I forgot any of the celebrities, please forgive me. I can't remember. It was a lot of people.
Let's talk about Tupac. I mean, how much time do you spend around him?
I was one of the last bodyguards to talk to Tupac. I remember when I got a call that he needed us to work for him, he was coming to New York. And he was going to perform at a club called Trafalgar Square, which is in Jamaica, Queens, Sutphin Boulevard, very dangerous part of Queens. And I got a call from his people, and they said, we could use you guys to, escort us here and there with, they called him Pac. And I wasn't really familiar with him. I had heard the name, but I didn't know how big he was. And he came to the club, and we worked with him, and it was a big, huge club, like held about 5,000 people in this club. It was huge. As a matter of fact, it still exists to this day, but it's changed the name. Anyway, he liked me and he invited me to hang out with him a couple of times and work for him, I think on about maybe 3 or 4 occasions. Not many, about 3 or 4 occasions. And he took a liking to me. My nickname in the bodyguard world was called Apollo. And I can't get into why they called me that, but that was my nickname. Most people in the security world didn't use their real name, because if you got into a fight in a club or anywhere, you didn't want them to identify who you were. So people call themselves a Hawk or Jaguar or, Apollo like me. So he would call me Papa Apollo. And I'll never forget one particular night, I wasn't working for him anymore, and I was working at a club called Chaz and Wilson's. It was on 78th Street and Amsterdam Avenue in New York City. And I believe that's the name. I'm pretty sure that was the name, Chaz Wilson. Anyway, I was working there that night, and when I was walking to the front where the ropes are, because I was a little late, one of the bouncers says, he goes, Apollo. He said, listen, man. He said, you know who's here looking for you? And I said, who? He said, Tupac. I said, really? He goes, yeah, he's in the back. Matter of fact, he's by the bathroom. And I went inside, and when I made the right, there he was, holding on to a young Spanish young lady, and they were, talking, being intimate. And I said, hey, buddy. And he goes, Papa Apollo. He says, hey, man, I came, because I want to know if you can work for me for a couple of days. And I said, no, buddy. I said, this is my new job. I just started. And I said, this is permanent. And I said, if I work for you, it'll only be a couple of days and I lose my job here. It makes no sense. So he goes, oh, man, I can give you a couple of extra dollars. So I said to him, no. But then I changed the subject because I can see that I wasn't convincing him. And I said, a matter of fact, I said, what is this that you having a problem with some East Coast, West Coast kind of beef thing? Because I'm not familiar with that. And he goes, nah, that's no big deal. People are making it bigger than what it is. People are just doing a lot of talking. He said, that's the nature of the business. I'm much older than him. So I was like, okay, no problem. When I told him, I said, listen, just be careful, man. I said, you're making so much money. I said, why waste it being around a bunch of fools? And he grabbed me and he hugged me and he said, I love you, man. And I said, I love you too, man. And he said, listen, I'm going to talk to you soon. And they killed him 2 weeks later. True story.
And when you heard about that,
Actually, what's kind of ironic is I heard about it, and we were having a conversation about it in a club called Vertical, not about his death, about him. And I remember a guy said, he got shot. And we was all, what are you talking about? And that was like the talk of the evening. But people didn't know he didn't die right away. He didn't die for about a day or a couple of days. And then he died. He was in a hospital for a little bit. And I was devastated because I felt that he just lived a little reckless. Good guy. He was the only rapper I really liked his music. Of all the rappers, to me, he was the best. And in my opinion. And another guy that I had that kind of conversation with him too. But he lived a lot longer, and that was DMX. That was one guy I didn't mention that I bodyguarded. I don't think I mentioned him, but he was another guy I bodyguarded who was a really nice guy. Tupac, DMX, Ice Cube were the three nicest guys that I had the pleasure of working with. DMX, he was great. It was always their entourage that was the fools, that wanted to be seen, that got them in trouble, that were just a bunch of dedicated idiots. It was always the entourage, the wannabes. Matter of fact, I kid you not, and I can prove it through many people, I walked out in the middle of DMX's national tour because the people he was around. And I couldn't take it no more. And he pretty much begged me to stay because he knew I was the only guy that wasn't getting high, wasn't smoking, wasn't drinking. I was always a focused bodyguard, always. I wasn't one of those guys. If I told you I was going to protect you, I was going to protect you. And DMX knew I had really good work ethics, and he didn't want me to leave. But I walked out in Washington, D.C. in the middle of his tour, and I said, I can't do this no more. And I took three of my nephew and two other gentlemen, Tony Harris and Bo the Polynesian Dream. That was his name. And I took him. Bobby Lee Lewis is my nephew. He's a retired detective. And we got in the car and we left, got our money and we left.
Now let's talk a little bit about Del the Art of Survival now.
Yeah.
When did you decide to start doing the publications?
It's a funny, very short story, but it's a funny story. My son, everybody knows Jacob. He's my life. That's my baby. That's my youngest son out of 5 handsome boys. He's the youngest, and I got 3 beautiful daughters. I had to say that. I had to give a shout out to my kids. Jacob is the youngest. extremely smart. And I kept hearing about magazines that weren't putting guys in that had good reputation, good martial artists, um, thorough martial artists. I can name so many of them back to back that I knew that I didn't even know that these guys weren't getting called to be in magazines. I just thought they just didn't want to be in magazines. One day I'm talking to a friend of mine, and I can say her name, and because I want to give her props, one of the baddest women on the planet, Miss Odette Russell, the wife of my brother, Abdul Mutakabea Sijau, one of the baddest martial artists to ever live. His wonderful wife, who I call my sister, she was telling me how she was having a problem getting her husband. Matter of fact, not even having a problem. She was just getting shut down by different martial arts magazines that didn't want her husband in it. I took that personal because I personally know him. And I know if anybody can be on the cover of a magazine, it was Abdul Mutaka Bear. I can name so many guys: Derek Williams, Sheldon Wilkins, Ralph Mitchell, all these guys, Anthony and Rango. I can go on and on. I don't want to name everybody, C4 Ortiz and Carl Albright, all these guys who are prolific martial artists. And I was wondering, I was saying, why aren't these guys being seen more? So I said to her, I said, you know, I got an idea. I said, I want to try something out. And I was going to give what they call the Legends Awards. It wasn't going to be the magazine. It was a Legends Award to show these guys how much the martial arts community loved them and appreciated them. Well, COVID happened. My mom died to COVID, and I had to cancel the show, and I felt horrible that I couldn't follow through with the Legends Awards. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a magazine, and I'm going to, being that we can't be in the crowded areas and socialize in auditoriums and stuff, I'll make a magazine, but it'll be a local magazine. I'll just be around the New York City area. The furthest we'll go is Connecticut, maybe Rhode Island, you know. I said, but nothing, I didn't want to commit to more than that. So I asked Odette if she knew a person that could make a cover, and then I'll put the papers together myself. And I showed it to my son. I said, son, what do you think it is? And my son started laughing. He goes, what is that? I said, this is a cover. I'm thinking about making a local magazine. He said, no, Daddy, you're not doing that. He said, no. He said, let me show you something. So about an hour later, he called me back and he said, check your messenger. And I checked my messenger and he showed me this cover. And I said, wow, you did that? He said, Daddy, I can do your whole magazine. And I was like, what? So I said, of course, yeah, let's do it. And then I started doing my research and I started telling him how I wanted the magazine, and he started just putting it together. And the rest is history. Well, before that, the rest is history. So finally, when we finished it, he said to me, he said, Dad, listen, I'm going to present this to Amazon. And I said, no, son. I said, no, don't do that. He said, no, Dad, let's give it a shot. I'm going to take it to Amazon. That was on a Thursday. That Saturday morning, my son called me and he goes, Daddy. I said, yes. He goes, check your Google. He says, go to Google and Google Deadly Art of Survival magazine. And I said, in my mind, I was like, oh God, they're going to say, you know, we rejected it or something. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I Googled it and it said, #1 new release, Deadly Art of Survival magazine. 3 days later, it said #1 bestseller magazine in antiques. And the rest is history. And from that magazine, the first edition, till this edition, we've been #1 straight through, the #1 magazine on Amazon. Actually, now we are the most popular martial arts magazine in the world right now. Yes.
Now, when did you do the first one?
September of 2001. We've only been out 8 months.
Oh, 2020.
And yeah, of 2021.
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, I thought you said 2020. Yeah, 2021.
Yeah.
Of September. So we've been out officially 8 months and going on 9 months, and we're on our seventh edition. Actually, our seventh edition will drop 3 weeks. My son is sitting right here. 3 weeks, right?
Yep.
3 weeks, our seventh edition will drop. And right now, it's just like I can't believe the success. I don't think anybody would have thought. What Wesley Snipes? Okay, I'm sorry. You just telling me Wesley Snipes just did something for us. But anyway, so we wouldn't have never thought. I wouldn't have never thought. My son, he's more of an optimist. I'm a pessimistic person. Sometimes, not with everything, but I wouldn't have never thought that we would be where we are. And I think what really helped the magazine, my son, who is actually a black belt under me, and he started training at the age of 8. He was an international karate champion as well as a Golden Glove boxer. He fought in the Golden Gloves, and he did very well. Actually, he lost to the Golden Glove champion by 1 point, and he fought the fight with a dislocated shoulder. I had to say that about my son. Now, with that being said, he actually, my son and I use the same work ethics that we use in our martial arts to approach this magazine. We deal with this magazine. People don't realize how hard it is to do a magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with magazines. It's one of the hardest things you can ever do in life. I don't know too many people that started and continue with it. This has been 17, 18-hour a day job from the morning when I wake up until the nighttime. I do my prayers first before I turn on my phone, and the first thing, business with the magazine. But I'm loving it because, I'm older now. I teach sparingly now. I don't have my school in Chinatown any longer, and I'm just making that announcement because not too many people knew that. We closed down about right during the pandemic, or right after my mother died. I just didn't have the energy to go on because she was one of my biggest supporters, and my dad, God bless him, was my biggest supporters. He used to come to all my fights, my father, and he would always say, "Boy, I don't care how much karate you know. I'll beat the crap out of you." That's what my father would always say. He's a great man. Great man.
How many pages did you start out with as far as like the first one?
I believe the first one had close to 80 pages.
Wow.
I think close to 80 pages. The second one had less. And no, the second one had more. I think the second one had the most pages. The second one had over 80 pages. Then we decided to bring it down a little bit, for future editions. And we now average between 50 and 55 pages per magazine. Mm-hmm.
And what are you?
And I don't know if you ever seen them. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What are you focusing on with it primarily, or you kind of?
Primarily, we're focusing on the unsung heroes of the martial arts, men and women in the martial arts that's given so much that you and I have never heard of. Not you and I, but you might not have heard of. Like a lot of names I was naming, you didn't know who they were. Right. These guys are legends on the East Coast. I mean, they would go to the West Coast and back in the days and smoke some of the fighters. I went to the West Coast in the 70s and smoked fighters that, and I ain't going to mention names because people, oh, no, you didn't. Yeah, we didn't have cell phone. We wasn't running around taking selfies back then and filming ourselves. We didn't have that luxury. So I hear a lot of guys say, oh, where's your film of this? Where's your film of that? Well, we didn't have the luxuries you guys had now of walking around, taking pictures of ourselves and more concerned about what you look like than what you're going to fight like. And back then, we didn't have that. So go back to the question again, because I went all over the place. Go back to the question again.
Well, I was asking, you kind of answered it where you said, I was asking, what is your focus? You said mostly to... Yeah, mostly the lead. I'm sorry, I went on into fighting because I started going back, reminiscing. But yeah, we're focused on, we want to give the people that nobody really talks about, nobody sees, we want to give them the opportunity to be seen. We want their legacies to be heard. This is important to me because I don't know if you know, it's no secret, everybody, you can Google it. I stopped a bank robbery back in 1981 and it became international news. Everybody knew who I was at that time for the first couple of days until I got threatened by
a gang that was robbing banks, and they called me an Uncle Tom. I was a sellout, and they threatened my family. They want to kill my family because they felt, hey man, you a sellout, man. You took the money from a guy who you didn't allow the guy to make the money who robbed the bank. And I'm sitting back saying, man, instead of them saying, man, you did a good job. You stopped bank robbery. That could have been my mother. My mother could have been the teller. They were threatening my family. I was done with the world, with even martial artists, didn't come to my back and try to say, this guy's in the martial arts. He did what we trained to do. And because prior to that bank robbery, it had never been done before. No martial artist had ever on record stop the bank robbery. So I remember I got really disappointed, and I didn't want my story to be told. When you don't want your story to be told, you cut your legacy. You stop your legacy. And it's not fair for so many guys. I know guys that's fighting hundreds of tournaments, winning hundreds of championships. Nobody ever heard of them. All the hard work in the dojo that these guys put in, and all the stuff that they do for their community. We got heroes in it. We have heroes in the community that do so much. It's a shame. It's really a shame to me that so many people, so many magazines will not recognize these heroes. And I got tired of it, like my brother Abdul Mutaka Bear, and they refused to put him on the cover. There's so many martial artists, that I can name that are not being put on the cover of different magazines that should be on there. How many times no disrespect to Bruce Lee, but how many times can you put him on the cover of Black Belt magazine?
Right.
No disrespect to Chuck Norris. How many times can you tell his story? Bruce Lee died at the age of 32. Some of these guys are in their 60s and 70s and won many championships that they can prove. Why are their stories not being told? And this is now, people come over to me and I thank them and thank you. And I mean this so humbly. Thank you guys, all the guys that are in the martial arts, and you come over to me and you thank me for giving you the opportunity to be in a magazine. I want to thank you for all you did for the martial arts world, what you did for the community and your community, because the difference in you, if you're listening and you've been in a magazine and you want to get in a magazine, the difference in you and regular superheroes and the comic book, Marvel superheroes, the Marvel superheroes, they destroy everywhere they go. They destroy cities. They kill each other. They destroy families. You don't see the aftermath of what they did. Martial artists in the urban communities and other communities, they build communities. They build students' character. They teach, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, the ones we use in our magazines, these guys are legends in their community. They've done community work. They teach in the worst environments where there's gangbangers. I know a guy that was shot in the leg opening up his dojo door, and he got caught up in crossfire and took him to the hospital, bandaged up his leg. He came out 2 days later, and he's still teaching in his dojo to this day, and that happened about 30 years ago. So, we have legends in the martial arts, and these are the stories. People need to hear real stories, not making a guy a hero because he made a movie. Make him a hero because he's alive. He's alive and he's doing really good thing in their community. Let's focus on those guys and women.
Now, I know on your Instagram you've kind of put like some of the newer clips of some techniques that you've seen in newer fights or recent fights. That's not necessarily in your magazine, right?
No. We have two magazines. We have another magazine coming out. Actually, it comes out in I think by Wednesday, and it's called The Warrior Weekly, and that's the brainchild of my son Jacob, the genius. He thought of it, and it's basically all fighting, kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA, jiu-jitsu, and it's going to give them the opportunity to shine, and to build their sports and give them more recognition. And so that's a different aspect of it's a takeoff of the Deadly Art of Survival. magazine. But it's all associated because the Deadly Art of Survival is the brainchild of it all, and we're just taking it off into different areas of martial arts.
Now I'm wondering if Jacob, if he saw the match the other night at Tokyo Dome.
Did you see the match the other night?
Who was fighting?
Who was fighting?
Well,
That means no.
It was called the match. 20.
Oh, it's called the match.
No, I didn't get it.
He don't watch TV much. Jacob is always putting together the magazine. These magazines, he don't have time. He's doing the magazine all day. We're on the phone, me and my son. We're on the phone with each other like 10 to 12 hours a day preparing the magazine. I'm telling him what I think we should go in, and he argues with me and Daddy, that's outdated. And then we come to a common ground. And then I got to give a shout out to Glenn Beck, who is one of an edition now magazine. This guy, he's like a brother to me. Him and I worked as bouncers in the club together, and now he's on board with us, and he's just help us take the magazine to a whole nother level. We got so many good people: Anthony Narango, Odette Russell, Kevin Pierre. We have so many good people that's helping us behind the scenes with our magazine. We have Thomas Gatlin with us, Hassan Khalik. Oh God, we have so many wonderful martial artists that's with us. And I want to name everybody. I can't remember everybody, but we have so many wonderful, incredible martial artists. And we couldn't be where we are without all these martial artists. It's not just Jacob and I. We have a whole team behind us, and we're just blessed. I'm still excited. We got the editions we got coming out. The rest of the year is going to blow the minds of people. We have our first international edition coming out in August, the end of August. All international martial arts stuff.
Is because Tenshin Nasukawa and Takeru Segawa were like the two best Japanese kickboxers. They're the same weight. They fought different organizations, and for about 10 years, people didn't want to see them fight each other, wanting to see them fight each other. So they fought in Tokyo Dome the other night. There was 80,000 people there.
Wow.
This was like, the spectacle was something. I lived in Japan for about 3 years, and I went to a stadium event one time. When they do this kind of stuff, it's unbelievable.
Wow.
The spectacle was incredible, for this fight. It was kind of a K1 versus Rise, which is who Tenshin fights for. But the fight itself was called The Match, and this, like I said, they had 80,000 people there to watch this fight.
Was it good?
Yeah, I thought
good
so.
Fight?
I mean, Tenshin beat Takeru, but yeah, I thought it was a good fight, and it was really interesting.
Yeah. Usually when they blow up fights like that, it's usually very rare does it pan out to be everything you would expect it to be, and then there's times where it does. I remember something funny when I hear things like that. I fought a gentleman, God bless the dead. He was my sparring partner. We were good sparring partner for years, since the early 70s. And the big noise was, we were both from Lower East Side of Manhattan. His name is Gaihiji T. Pantera. God bless him. I think about him and I want to tear up. And we were like two guys that everybody wanted to see fight, but we were good friends. And I didn't want to fight him and he didn't want to fight me. But people kept asking everywhere we go. And finally, I had my first kickboxing loss. I lost to a guy from the Turtle School from out of Newark, New Jersey. And I lost to him at the Fujao Pai championships in Chinatown. And I wanted to redeem myself. So my manager at the time, Dr. Winston, he was a chiropractor, he said to me, listen, if you were going to redeem yourself, why don't you fight that guy everybody's talking about, Gaihiji Pantera? And I said, he used to be my sparring partner. He said, well, you guys can make some good money if you fought him. And if you fought each other. And I wind up calling Gaihiji. I said, listen, what do you think? And he says, okay, let's do it. I didn't know that I hurt his feelings. I didn't know that until later on. And that I hurt his feelings by even asking him to fight me. And he's gone now, but I went to his his
About to time me out. Hold on, I'm going to bring you back right quick.
okay.
Thank